I never thought love could turn into a weapon. I never imagined the same voice that once whispered, "I'll never hurt you," would be the one that left me completely shattered. My name is Arav, and this is the story of how I learned the ugliest truth about love. That sometimes, the people you trust the most are the ones who enjoy watching you fall apart. It all started 2 years ago. Back then, my life was simple, focused, and quiet. I wasn't the kind of man who sought attention or chased glamour. My world revolved around my small digital startup, a dream I had been nurturing since college. I didn't have wealth or power, but I had something far more valuable: hunger. The hunger to create something meaningful. The hunger to prove myself. Every morning, I woke up before sunrise, powered by caffeine and determination. My life was about goals, growth, and grit. I didn't care about love or relationships. That was until she entered my world, Maya. I still remember the first time I saw her. It was at a marketing seminar downtown. She sat 2 rows ahead of me, her presence impossible to ignore. There was something magnetic about her confidence, the way she carried herself, the calm but sharp glint in her eyes, the subtle smile that seemed to know too much. She wasn't like the others who were busy networking or showing off. She listened, observed, and somehow made the entire room feel like it revolved around her. I didn't even realize I had been staring until she turned around, caught my gaze, and smiled. It wasn't just any smile. It was the kind that hits you like a spark. I looked away, embarrassed, pretending to take notes. When the seminar ended, I was packing up my notebook when she approached me. "You take notes like a professor," she said, her tone playful, teasing. "You must be serious about your work." Her voice carried this mix of confidence and warmth that instantly drew me in. I laughed awkwardly and told her I just didn't want to forget anything important. We started talking about marketing, design, and business ideas. Her mind was sharp. Every opinion she shared had weight. She wasn't just beautiful. She was intelligent, ambitious, and fearless. That same evening, she added me on LinkedIn. A few hours later, I got a follow request on Instagram. Then a message. "Coffee tomorrow? I have a few ideas to discuss." I hesitated for maybe 3 seconds before replying, "Yes." Our first coffee lasted 3 hours. What was supposed to be a quick chat turned into endless conversation. She told me she was a freelance designer trying to build her brand, that she admired people who took risks, that she respected ambition. She listened with genuine interest when I talked about my startup and the challenges I faced. At least I thought it was genuine. Her laughter was effortless, her empathy convincing. I felt seen for the first time in a long time. After that, it became routine. Texts every morning, calls every night, random visits to my workspace. She'd show up with coffee saying, "You've probably been skipping meals again." She made me feel cared for, important, and alive. I was falling, and I didn't even try to stop it. It felt real, it felt safe. And for a man who had only known work, that feeling was intoxicating. Weeks turned into months, and soon we were inseparable. She knew everything about me. My struggles, my dreams, my insecurities. I opened up completely, never suspecting that every word I shared was being stored, analyzed, and quietly weaponized. Because while I was falling in love, she was studying me. There were moments I now look back on and realize were red flags. The way she'd ask questions that seemed innocent but weren't. "Who handles your finances?" she'd ask casually over dinner. Or, "Do you trust your business partner completely?" Sometimes she'd even joke, "What would you do if someone took everything from you?" Back then, I laughed it off. I thought she was just curious. I never realized she was mapping out my weaknesses like a strategist preparing for war. Maya was a master at balance. Just enough affection to keep me hooked. Just enough mystery to keep me chasing. She knew when to be soft, when to be distant, when to draw me in again. I started relying on her for advice, comfort, even direction. She became the voice in my head guiding every decision. And that was exactly how she wanted it. She once told me, "Arav, I see something in you that most people don't. You're not ordinary." It sounds like a compliment, doesn't it? But what I didn't realize then was that she meant it literally. I wasn't ordinary. I was useful. A project, a resource, a ladder. Sometimes late at night, we'd talk about the future, what we wanted, where we saw ourselves. She'd always say, "We're going to make it big together." I believed her. Those words became my motivation. I couldn't see that her together didn't mean with me. It meant through me. There were small moments when my gut whispered that something was off, like when she'd get mysterious texts and hide her phone, or when she'd change the topic whenever I asked about her work. Once, I caught her taking photos of my financial documents while pretending to text. When I asked why, she laughed it off. Relax, I was just checking something for your presentation. I wanted to believe her, so I did. Because when you're in love, your brain stops protecting you. I told myself that love was about trust, that doubts ruin relationships. But what I didn't understand was that blind trust ruins people. Maya wasn't in love with me. She was invested in me. There's a difference. Her eyes didn't shine with affection. They gleamed with calculation. I didn't see it then because I didn't want to. She had already mastered the game long before I realized I was playing. When I look back now, I realize she never lied outright. She just told half-truths, sprinkled with charm. And I filled in the blanks with my own emotions, my own faith. She didn't deceive me with words. She deceived me with timing, with attention, with silence. At the time, I thought I had found someone who completed me. But in reality, I had found someone who was quietly dismantling me piece by piece, one smile at a time. I was too blind to see that I wasn't her partner. I was her experiment, her project, her stepping stone to something bigger. She played her role perfectly, and I fell right into the trap she had built with my own trust. Because love didn't destroy me. She did. And the worst part, she did it so beautifully that I thanked her while she was breaking me. At first, everything felt like a dream. Maya had become the center of my life, the constant presence I didn't know I needed. She encouraged me in ways that made my heart swell. She'd show up at my office with coffee, a bright smile, and words that seemed to lift the weight off my shoulders. "Arav, you're going to make it," she'd say, her voice soft but certain, as if she could see a future I hadn't even dared to imagine. I believed her completely. Every nod, every laugh, every look felt genuine. I thought I had found someone who understood me, who valued me, and who truly loved me. And I fell hard. Within 3 months, we were inseparable. We spoke every day, texted constantly, and spent hours together discussing everything from business ideas to dreams and fears. I introduced her to my friends, to my small team, even to my parents. Everyone liked her. She had that rare ability to make people trust her instantly, to make them believe in her warmth and honesty. When she walked into a room, people listened. When she spoke, people followed. I didn't notice the subtle ways she positioned herself, the way her charm worked like a magnet, drawing admiration from everyone around us. At first, it was intoxicating. She seemed genuinely invested in my life, my ambitions, and my dreams. She listened when I spoke about my startup, the struggles, the long nights, the endless planning. She would offer advice, critique my ideas in a way that felt helpful, never condescending. Sometimes I'd catch her watching me quietly, head tilted slightly, a small smile playing on her lips, and I'd feel like the most important person in the world. I wanted to protect her, make her happy, do everything she suggested because I believed in us. But slowly, almost imperceptibly, things began to shift. Her questions became sharper, more probing, less about curiosity and more about control. "Who handles your finances, Arav?" she asked casually one evening over dinner. "Do you trust your partner completely?" she would say with a smile, tilting her head like she was innocently trying to understand me. "How much does your company make a month?" These questions seemed harmless, wrapped in genuine interest, and I answered them without hesitation. I thought she was curious, concerned even, because she was invested in our future together. I didn't realize that each question was a carefully calculated move in a game I didn't even know I was playing. Then came the idea, the one that seemed perfect at the time, but which, in hindsight, was the first piece of the trap. "Arav, why don't we collaborate?" she said one afternoon, her eyes bright with enthusiasm. "I can handle your branding, your social media, your design work. You focus on running the business. Together we'll be unstoppable." Her voice was persuasive, passionate and convincing. The thought of sharing my dreams with someone I loved, someone who seemed to genuinely care about my success, made my heart leap. I didn't hesitate, I agreed. We drew up a basic partnership agreement, 40% for her, 60% for me. She told me it was fair, and I trusted her judgment completely. In the beginning, everything seemed to work beautifully. She threw herself into the work, redesigning presentations, handling client communications, creating new strategies for marketing campaigns. She seemed genuinely thrilled to be part of the business, and I felt proud to have someone so talented by my side. The synergy between us was remarkable. Clients praised our teamwork, and I felt a sense of security and excitement I had never experienced before. For a moment, I truly believed we were building something extraordinary together, a shared dream that was impossible to break. But gradually, subtle changes began to appear. She started taking decisions without consulting me, approving deals, making client calls, and changing timelines. When I questioned her, she would smile and say, "I didn't want to bother you. You've been working so hard. I thought I could take care of it." At first, I felt relieved. She was helping, wasn't she? She was handling things so I could focus on the larger picture. But over time, the relief turned into unease. She began to dominate meetings, charm clients, and subtly present herself as the authority figure. I remember one particular pitch where a client turned to her mid-discussion and said, "You've built an impressive setup." She smiled and said, "Thank you, we've worked hard." And in that moment, the use of "we" felt like a small wedge being driven between me and my own company. She was building her presence at my expense, and I didn't even notice. Her tone, once soft and encouraging, slowly took on a sharper edge. She questioned decisions in front of others, not rudely but firmly, undermining my authority without ever seeming cruel. "Are you sure this is the best approach?" she'd ask, a small tilt of her head and a calm smile giving her words the weight of logic. She was careful, precise, and subtle enough that I doubted my own instincts, wondering if I was overreacting. Even the questions she asked evolved into instruments of control. "Can I have admin access to the main dashboard? Did you update the client contracts? How much do we have in the main account?" They didn't feel threatening, not yet. But they were building the foundation for a future where I would have no control at all. I brushed aside the unease, convincing myself it was teamwork, that she was just passionate and detail-oriented. But deep down, a tiny voice whispered doubts, small and fleeting, that I pushed aside because love has a way of silencing reason. Then there was the celebration night after we landed a major client, the biggest of my career at that point. I raised a toast to our partnership, to the dream we were building together, but I noticed the smile she gave me. It wasn't the same warmth I'd fallen for. It was colder, sharper, almost triumphant. That smile should have warned me. It should have told me that she was no longer walking beside me in love, but moving ahead of me in strategy. I didn't see it then. I couldn't see it. The illusion was perfect. Every gesture, every word, every supportive look, carefully calculated. She had me believing in a shared dream, a shared future, while slowly tightening the invisible chains around me. I was blind to the warning signs, intoxicated by the sense of perfection, blinded by love and trust. And so, I carried on, unaware that I was stepping further into a carefully laid trap. Because when someone is as skilled as Maya at building illusions, it isn't just about tricking the mind. It's about capturing the heart. The perfect illusion was working, and I was falling into it completely. The first few months of working together had felt almost perfect. Our projects were taking off, clients were happy, and I had Maya by my side, which made me feel invincible. Every success felt sweeter because we shared it. I believed we were unstoppable, a team that complemented each other perfectly. I still remember the thrill of landing our first major client together, the excitement in her eyes, the way she clapped her hands with joy, the infectious energy she brought to every small victory. It felt like nothing could touch us, like we had built our own little world where success and happiness existed without compromise. I was proud, and I loved seeing her pride mirrored in her expression. At that time, I truly believed she shared my dreams and my vision for the future. But behind the smiles, the late-night dinners, and the romantic gestures, cracks were quietly forming. At first, I dismissed them. I chalked up her small disagreements or changes in behavior to stress or ambition. But gradually, the subtle shifts became impossible to ignore. She was changing, she was taking control, but not in the way a partner or collaborator should. It started with small decisions. She would reject clients I had worked hard to secure, make changes to budgets without consulting me, and sometimes even sign deals in her own name. At first, I thought maybe she was just trying to help, to protect our shared vision. I wanted to believe that. I wanted to trust her completely, as I had from the beginning. When I confronted her, she brushed it off with a smile and a soothing tone. "Arav, relax. You're too emotional. I'm just doing what's best for us." That word, us, suddenly felt heavy, deceptive. It should have comforted me, reassured me that we were partners, that she had my back. Instead, it felt like a mask, a lie hiding her true intentions. My chest tightened every time she said it, and for the first time, I felt a flicker of doubt. Then came the signs that couldn't be ignored. The late-night calls she avoided answering, the sudden, unexplained trips she claimed were for work, and the frequent mood swings that left me confused and anxious. I told myself I shouldn't overthink, that love required patience, understanding, and trust. But deep down, a tiny voice in my gut screamed that something was very wrong, something that didn't make sense, something deliberate. One evening, I stayed late at the office, hoping to finish a pitch for an important client. The room was empty, except for the soft hum of the fluorescent lights. That's when I noticed her laptop left open on the shared desk. My curiosity, tinged with unease, got the better of me. A message notification blinked on the screen, a name I didn't recognize. My pulse quickened, and with a mix of dread and need to know, I opened the chat. The words I saw made my heart stop. He still has no idea. You're brilliant. My hand shook as I scrolled through the conversation, each line worse than the last. It was proof of everything I had begun to suspect, yet had been too afraid to face. She was planning to take control of the company entirely. Every client I had cultivated, every partnership I had nurtured, was being quietly shifted to her accounts. She was slowly freezing me out, stripping me of the business I had built from scratch. And I had been blind to it all. But the betrayal cut even deeper when I realized who she was working with. The man texting her, congratulating her, and coordinating behind my back was my investor. The person I had trusted to support my vision, to guide me, to invest in my future, was colluding with her. I felt like the world had flipped upside down. Every moment I had celebrated our progress, every success I had thought we shared, suddenly felt like a lie. I sank into the chair, staring at the screen, disbelief and anger battling inside me. I went over the messages again, trying to understand, trying to convince myself that there was some mistake. But there was no mistake. Each message, each plan, each careful move revealed her intentions, and they were as cold and calculated as they were brilliant. She hadn't rushed into this. She hadn't acted recklessly. Every detail had been meticulously planned. Every opportunity for me to notice her machinations deliberately hidden. A mix of grief and fury washed over me. I had trusted her with everything, my time, my energy, my heart, my dreams, and she had weaponized that trust against me. But beneath the hurt, beneath the disbelief, a small, sharp spark of resolve began to burn. I realized that she had underestimated me. She thought my love and trust would make me passive, that I would crumble quietly while she executed her plan. But I wasn't going to. I wouldn't let her take everything without a fight. For hours, I sat there, planning silently, trying to figure out the next move. The betrayal wasn't just emotional. It was professional, financial, strategic. She had turned my company, my vision, my life into a playground for her ambitions. And now I knew I had to play smarter. I had to turn the tables, to reclaim what was mine, and to show her that someone who had been deeply betrayed could rise stronger, sharper, and more determined than she ever imagined. The realization was sobering but empowering. I couldn't undo the past, couldn't erase the manipulation or the deceit, but I could control the future. The fire in me, fueled by betrayal, started to grow. I knew one thing with absolute certainty. This was no longer about heartbreak. This was about reclaiming control, justice, and proving that I wasn't the same man who had been fooled so easily. She had made the first move, but I would finish the game. And as I stared at the messages on the screen, I made a silent vow. I would rise, I would rebuild, and she would regret every calculated step she had taken against me, because I wasn't just going to survive. I was going to win. The first stab of betrayal had hit, but it would not be the last. And when the reckoning came, she would realize too late that she had awakened a force she could never contain. The week that followed was chaos unlike anything I'd ever experienced. It felt as though my entire world was unraveling at a speed I couldn't control. Clients I had nurtured for months, some for years, began leaving one by one. Calls went unanswered, contracts vanished, and emails bounced back as if they had never been sent. The stability I had fought so hard to create evaporated almost overnight. My investor, the one person who had promised unwavering support, suddenly withdrew entirely. Promises of long-term guidance, assurances of partnership, all gone in an instant. It was as though someone had flipped a switch, turning everything I had worked for into dust, and I was left standing in the ruins. Then the email arrived. The sender was familiar, hauntingly so, and my stomach dropped before I even opened it. Maya. I stared at the subject line, heart racing. hands trembling. I hesitated, unsure if I wanted to face the words. But the moment my cursor hovered over the message, a sinking feeling in my chest forced me to open it. I read her words slowly, each one hitting me like a hammer. Arav, I think it's better we go our separate ways. You've changed. I'm taking my part of the business and moving on. I sat frozen, staring at the screen as the reality sank in. Her tone was casual, almost polite, but it was devastating. She wasn't simply leaving me. She was taking everything I had built, every client relationship I had cultivated, every account, every carefully crafted piece of reputation, gone. Overnight, the dream I had poured my heart into, the company I had built from scratch, vanished as if it had never existed. And she walked away untouched, without even a trace of the chaos she left behind. She had taken my world and left me in fragments, smiling as though nothing had happened. For days, I couldn't sleep. Nights stretched endlessly, filled with restless tossing, racing thoughts, and a constant replay of every memory I had of her. I asked myself over and over how I had been so blind, how I could have missed all the warning signs. How could I have trusted so completely, loved so deeply, only to be betrayed so ruthlessly? Every conversation, every word of encouragement, every smile, every promise felt tainted now, each one a thread in the web of deception she had spun around me. I felt hollow, stripped of not just my business, but of my belief in the people I had let close. I withdrew from everyone. Family tried to console me, friends reached out, but I couldn't respond. Their words felt distant, powerless against the weight of the betrayal I was carrying. Even their presence reminded me of what I had lost, of how fully I had been manipulated. The betrayal wasn't just a professional wound, it was deeply personal. Maya hadn't merely stolen my company, she had stolen my trust, my innocence, and my belief that love and loyalty could coexist. Each memory I had cherished, each moment I had thought was genuine, now seemed like a carefully orchestrated lie. In the silence of my apartment, I spent long nights scrolling through old chats, rereading messages, and looking at photos of us together. Each image, each word, now felt like a cruel joke. I could see the manipulation in hindsight, the way she had strategically built trust, how she had made herself indispensable while quietly undermining me. My emotions were a storm, grief, anger, confusion, but somewhere beneath it all, a spark of something else began to burn. I realized, with painful clarity, that she had assumed my downfall was inevitable, that because I had loved her, I would be powerless to resist her. But she had underestimated me. She had misjudged my resilience, my determination, and my refusal to be defeated. In taking everything, she had lit a fire inside me that could not be extinguished. My grief transformed into resolve, and my anger became a tool I could wield. I understood that revenge wasn't about harming her in the same way she had harmed me. It was about reclaiming what was mine, restoring my life, and proving to myself that I was stronger than the betrayal. Every step she had taken to dismantle my life became a lesson, a guide for me to plan my own strategy. Every client she had moved, every decision she had manipulated, every secret she had exploited, revealed the methods and vulnerabilities that I could now turn to my advantage. The depth of her deceit was staggering, but it also provided me with the roadmap to counter it. I began to see the patterns, to anticipate moves, and to recognize the gaps in her carefully constructed armor. I stayed up late into the night, not in despair, but in calculation. I retraced her steps, analyzed her contacts, and studied the ways she had isolated me from my own company. I realized that while she had taken my money, my clients, and my reputation, she had left one thing vulnerable: herself. Her arrogance, her belief that I would never fight back, was her weakness. I could use it, and I would. Pain, as unbearable as it was, became my weapon. Betrayal became my teacher. Every sleepless night, every memory twisted into a lesson in strategy and resilience. I understood that her victory was temporary because it was built on underestimating the person she thought she had destroyed. And so, in the midst of heartbreak, I made a silent vow. She had thought she could walk away unscathed, leaving me broken and powerless. She had assumed my love for her would keep me passive, that her theft of my life would be the final act. But she was wrong. I would rise from this, stronger, smarter, and more relentless than she had ever imagined. She had stolen much from me, but she had not taken my spirit, my intelligence, or my capacity to fight. The betrayal had been total, yes, but it had also been illuminating. It showed me exactly who she was, what she was capable of, and most importantly, what I was capable of. She had believed she had won, but in doing so, she had awakened a force she could not control. I was no longer just a victim of love and trust. I was a man who had been forged in betrayal, and I was ready to reclaim everything that had been taken from me. Pain had taught me clarity. Loss had taught me strategy. Betrayal had taught me vigilance. And as the days passed, as the anger settled into determination, I realized that I was no longer the same person who had fallen so completely for her charm and deceit. I was someone entirely new, someone she would come to fear, someone who would ensure that the consequences of her actions were felt in ways she could never have anticipated. She had stolen more than money. She had stolen my trust, but she had also unknowingly given me the fuel to rise again, and I was ready to use it. I disappeared completely. No calls, no messages, no social media updates, nothing. Everyone assumed I had given up. Friends worried. My old clients assumed I'd shut down. And even my former team probably whispered about how I had finally broken under the weight of betrayal. Maya, I imagined, must have smiled to herself, convinced she had won, certain I would crumble silently. But while the world saw a vanishing act, I was anything but gone. I was rebuilding, quietly, meticulously, like a man reforging himself in the fire of everything that had been stolen from him. The first weeks were brutal. I let myself feel the full weight of loss and anger because ignoring it would have been a mistake. Every sleepless night, every flashback of conversations and smiles, every memory of trust and laughter that had turned out to be deception, I let it fuel me. I let it sharpen my focus rather than dull it. The grief was real, but I converted it into energy, a tool to create something stronger than what had existed before. I started by educating myself. I dove into business law like my life depended on it, because in a world where trust had been weaponized, knowledge was my only armor. I learned about contracts, intellectual property, investor rights, and non-compete clauses. I read everything I could find on corporate governance, audit processes, and secure financial structures. Every legal term I didn't understand became a lesson. Every case study, a map of how to survive when someone tries to take everything from you. Alongside that, I refined my marketing knowledge, exploring modern strategies, psychology-driven campaigns, and messaging that could persuade without relying on charm alone. I learned investor relations, not for vanity or networking, but so I could identify red flags, protect myself, and manage partnerships that might otherwise be exploited. As I built knowledge, I built strategy. I designed a new company in my mind, a business constructed to be bulletproof. I created a governance system with multiple approvals for critical actions, layered financial controls, and strict client onboarding processes. I drafted contracts in consultation with a legal advisor, each one designed to prevent unilateral decision-making or account theft. I built systems to track every interaction, every transaction, every milestone, so no one could manipulate or bypass the rules. Where before I had trusted blindly, I now trusted with clear boundaries and protections. I would never be vulnerable in the same way again. The new company needed a new identity, a clean slate. I carefully selected a brand name, a voice, and an aesthetic that would attract attention without revealing my history. No one from my past, including Maya, would know it was me. I wanted anonymity because revenge wasn't about recognition. It was about leverage. I focused on creating a product that solved a real problem, stronger than anything I had launched before. Every feature was designed to outshine the competition. Every marketing strategy calculated to maximize reach and impact. I worked nights, iterating relentlessly, testing campaigns, analyzing data, and refining messaging until it became precise, targeted, and impossible to ignore. Contracts were my obsession. I built safeguards into every deal, from clients to partners to vendors. I learned from the past. No more trusting words alone, no more handshakes. Every commitment was documented, every responsibility clearly defined, every possible loophole closed. I created transparent financial processes with audit trails so that any attempt to exploit the system could be instantly traced. I fortified my company against manipulation, ensuring that no one could ever isolate or undermine me in the way I had once been left vulnerable. Months passed in quiet, relentless work. I focused on growth, small but meaningful wins. Initial clients were handpicked, partnerships carefully vetted, and marketing campaigns launched in measured phases. I built a reputation on precision, reliability, and integrity, letting results speak louder than promises. Every milestone, Every small success felt like reclaiming a piece of myself that had been stolen. I was no longer just rebuilding a business. I was reconstructing my confidence, my discipline, and my understanding of power. Then, one morning, fate, or perhaps the poetic justice of timing, arrived in my inbox. An email notification blinked, and my eyes caught the sender, Maya's assistant. The subject line was innocuous enough. Marketing partner inquiry. My heart skipped a beat, and a slow, incredulous grin spread across my face. I opened the email and read. They were looking for a marketing partner for a major campaign, someone to deliver measurable results. They had reached out to me, unaware that the person they thought was gone had returned under a new guise. I didn't respond immediately. I let the email sit, letting the moment stretch, letting the irony sink in. She had assumed my disappearance meant defeat. She had assumed I was finished, that my anger had subsided, that my dreams had crumbled entirely. And here she was, unknowingly stepping straight into a situation I controlled entirely. The power dynamic had shifted. For months I had studied, planned, and rebuilt. Now the opportunity presented itself on a silver platter. When I finally drafted a response, it was calculated and professional, showing competence without revealing my personal history. I requested KPIs, project scope, and staged engagement structures, including milestone payments and legal safeguards. I insisted on clarity, transparency, and accountability. They agreed. They wanted results, and I could provide them, better, faster, and stronger than they had ever imagined. I was no longer the naive founder who trusted blindly. I was a strategist, prepared, patient, and deliberate. This was the turning point. I wasn't seeking petty revenge to humiliate. I was reclaiming power and establishing dominance in a way she could not anticipate. The company I had rebuilt, the systems I had implemented, and the legal safeguards I had put in place created an environment where every interaction, every contract, every milestone was in my control. The trap was not a spectacle, it was a precise, well-laid plan designed to expose and outmaneuver her, a demonstration that I had risen above betrayal, smarter and stronger than before. She had stolen my business, my trust, my confidence, but in doing so, she had forced me to become something new, disciplined, strategic, and unshakable. She had created the conditions for her own undoing without ever realizing it. And as I prepared to take the first steps in this campaign, I felt a quiet satisfaction. She was about to encounter the consequences of underestimating me, of believing that love and trust could make a man powerless. I had turned pain into power, betrayal into clarity, and loss into a plan that would ultimately ensure her miscalculation became her downfall. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the screen, and for the first time in months, I smiled without bitterness. This time the control was mine. The game had changed, and I was ready to see it through to the end. I accepted the proposal under my new identity, careful to conceal every trace of my real self. Maya had no idea she was dealing with the same man she had once betrayed, the same man she thought she had destroyed completely. Weeks of virtual meetings passed, each one a lesson in restraint and observation. She maintained the same confident, commanding tone that had once drawn me in, the same practiced sweetness that masked every hidden intention. She spoke incessantly about her successes, her strategies, and the reputation she had built since we parted ways, as if the world owed her praise for her brilliance. I listened patiently, letting her words flow over me, storing every inflection, every detail, every brag, until the moment was right. During this time, I studied her like I had never studied anything before. I observed the way her team responded to her commands, how decisions were made, how contracts were drafted, and how she positioned herself as indispensable. Every gesture, every choice, every tiny detail of her behavior became a piece of the puzzle. I needed to understand exactly how she operated, the same way she had once dismantled my life so carefully, so methodically. I collected the evidence quietly, building my arsenal without revealing even the smallest hint of my true identity. My outward persona was calm, professional, and unthreatening, exactly the disguise I needed to ensure she underestimated me, just as she had in the past. Weeks passed, and the opportunity I had been waiting for finally arrived, an in-person meeting. When she walked into the boardroom, she carried the same elegance, confidence, and air of control that had always been her signature. Her heels clicked against the floor with authority, and she moved with that familiar charisma that had once made my heart race. She glanced around the room, scanning the faces of the team members and colleagues, and then her eyes landed on me. The recognition hit her like a cold shock. Her smile froze, her posture stiffened, and she faltered for the briefest moment, whispering my name without belief. Arav. I let the silence stretch, allowing the moment to sink in fully. I didn't rise, didn't offer any dramatics, didn't allow emotion to flare. I simply kept my voice steady, calm, and unyielding. Surprised, I asked, "You're in my office now." The room went utterly silent. Her team glanced between us, unsure what was happening, their confusion palpable. The tension was almost physical, thick in the air like smoke. I didn't need theatrics. The situation itself carried the weight. Her carefully constructed confidence faltered in the face of reality. The very man she had tried to destroy was seated calmly at the head of the table, entirely in control of the situation. I began to present the evidence. I laid out, systematically and unemotionally, every move she had made to manipulate, siphon, and control. Every transferred client, every diverted fund, every breach of partnership agreements, documented, irrefutable, and ready for legal scrutiny, was revealed with precision. I had ensured that every loophole she had relied on was covered, every transaction traceable, every misstep verifiable. I showed how she had violated agreements, acted unethically, and made moves that were not only morally wrong, but legally actionable. I explained that the legal channels had already been activated, and that the evidence was being used to protect what rightfully belonged to the company and to me. Her face drained of color as the reality hit. The confident, commanding woman who had once manipulated and controlled others was suddenly faltering under the weight of her own deception. She stammered, her words rushed and incoherent, attempting excuses, half-hearted justifications, and pleas for understanding. "I didn't mean to. I only wanted success. It wasn't personal," she murmured, but it was too late. The room had already absorbed the truth. There was no room for excuses, no path to reclaim the authority she thought she had. The evidence spoke for itself, and the moment I had orchestrated was complete. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't lash out. I didn't allow any hint of anger or triumph to surface. I simply looked at her steadily and said, with quiet intensity, "You played with feelings, Maya, but feelings aren't toys. They turn into fire when betrayed." The words hung in the room, a measured statement of truth rather than accusation. The fire I had felt for months, the betrayal that had cut so deep, had been transformed into controlled power. Every client, every colleague, every team member in the room saw what had been hidden for so long. The truth of her actions, the consequences of her manipulation, and the complete reversal of control. She had believed herself untouchable, but here, in my presence, she was vulnerable and exposed. The impact was immediate. The contract she had been pursuing, the very reason for the meeting, was no longer within her grasp. Word of her unethical behavior spread quickly among the decision-makers present, and the damage to her credibility was irreversible. Over the following weeks, her reputation began to crumble. Clients left, partnerships dissolved, and opportunities she had relied on vanished. The veneer of competence and charm she had cultivated with painstaking care shattered under the weight of truth. The same confidence she had wielded to manipulate and dominate became a liability, leaving her isolated and exposed to the consequences of her own actions. The satisfaction I felt was quiet, calm, and controlled. This was not about humiliating her for sport. It was about restoring balance, reclaiming control, and proving that betrayal could be met with patience, strategy, and precision. She had underestimated the man she had once deceived. She had assumed that time and distance had left me powerless, that her manipulations would remain unchallenged. She was wrong. The fire she had sparked through her betrayal had been transformed into disciplined power, and the consequences were unfolding exactly as they should. As I left that boardroom, the weight of months of planning, rebuilding, and patience lifted. The truth had been revealed. Justice had been delivered, and the reversal of fortune was complete. Maya's empire, built on deception and manipulation, began to collapse in ways she could never have anticipated, while I stood firm, unbroken, and stronger than ever. The man she thought she destroyed had not only survived, he had risen, tempered by fire, sharpened by betrayal, and fully in command of his own destiny. News spread faster than I could have imagined. Within days, the word of Maya's downfall traveled quietly but relentlessly through the industry. Clients who had once trusted her implicitly began to withdraw their accounts one by one, citing concerns about her credibility and the ethical practices of her operations. Partners she had relied on for collaborations and strategic alliances started to distance themselves, their confidence shaken by the revelations that had come to light. Even those who had once admired her sharp intellect and charismatic authority began to view her with suspicion. The elegant, poised woman who had once walked into every room with unwavering self-assurance was now confronted with doubt at every turn. She tried to reassure people, attempted to rebuild her reputation, pitched herself to new clients, and emphasized past achievements. She smiled and spoke with practiced charm, but there was no hiding the cracks beneath the surface. Trust, once broken, is fragile, and hers had been shattered irreparably. Each effort to regain footing only revealed the gaps in her credibility, leaving her exposed and vulnerable in ways she had never anticipated. Meanwhile, my new company continued to grow, steadily, deliberately, and without fanfare. It wasn't fueled by revenge or spite, but by lessons learned from months of heartbreak, betrayal, and careful observation. I had discovered how to separate emotion from ambition, how to channel my anger and disappointment into precision and strategy rather than impulsive action. Every decision, every campaign, every contract was measured, deliberate, and calculated for long-term sustainability. The growth was not sudden or explosive. It was steady, a reflection of careful planning, resilience, and consistency. Unlike before, I relied on systems, processes, and accountability rather than trust alone. Every client interaction was secured with clarity, every partnership defined with safeguards, and every business move fortified against manipulation. My company thrived not because I sought revenge, but because I had learned how to protect my work, my reputation, and my future. Months passed, and one morning I received an email that caused a slight tightening in my chest. The sender's name was unmistakable: Maya. The subject line was brief and almost understated. "I'm sorry." I opened it, my eyes scanning the words carefully. She apologized for the damage she had caused, for the deception, for the disruption to both my personal life and professional endeavors. She seemed to be seeking some form of acknowledgement, perhaps even forgiveness. There was no pretense of charm, no attempt at manipulation this time, just a simple apology. I didn't reply. Not because I lacked the capacity to respond, but because some apologies are too late. Some actions cannot be undone with a few typed words. Some lessons are learned only through experience, and the consequences of her choices had already spoken louder than any message she could send. I had learned the hard way that trust and betrayal are forces beyond simple restitution, and that some wounds are not meant to be healed by others. Life had already taught the lesson in full. The damage had been done, the consequences were set, and there was nothing left for me to add. I didn't need to destroy her. I didn't orchestrate public humiliation or plan dramatic revenge. I didn't need to confront her with malice or spectacle. The truth itself was enough. Her empire, built on manipulation, charm, and carefully curated appearances, had begun to unravel because the foundations were flawed. Clients withdrew, partners questioned her reliability, and opportunities she had once relied upon disappeared. Her credibility, painstakingly built over years of effort, eroded almost overnight, leaving her exposed to the consequences of her own choices. She had acted as if the rules of honesty, trust, and integrity were optional, and now she was paying the price. Watching it unfold, I realized something important. The victory was not mine in the traditional sense. I did not need to wield power against her personally. I did not need to issue judgments or enact punishments. What I had done was reclaim my life, rebuild my company, and restore my sense of self. My triumph came from resilience, strategy, and patience, not revenge. The consequences Maya faced were the natural outcomes of her own actions, a reflection of the reality she had chosen to ignore. She had believed she could manipulate me, exploit me, and emerge unscathed. But she had underestimated the depth of my resolve and the power of measured, deliberate action. In the quiet aftermath, I understood the larger lesson. Betrayal had been a teacher, heartbreak a guide. I had learned how to separate emotion from business, how to build systems that could withstand manipulation, and how to rise stronger when the foundation beneath me had been shaken. I had discovered resilience in ways I never imagined, and I had harnessed the pain she inflicted to create something lasting, something real, something unstoppable. Every success my company achieved was a testament to that journey, from despair to strategy, from betrayal to clarity, from heartbreak to unshakable strength. Sometime later, as I continued to focus on growth, innovation, and leadership, the final piece became clear. Maya's apology, though sincere in appearance, held no power. It could not erase the consequences of her choices, nor could it alter the path I had carved for myself. She had believed she could control the narrative, manipulate the outcome, and dictate the terms of success. Instead, she had played herself. Every decision she had made in pursuit of advantage, every manipulation she had employed, every trust she had broken, had circled back in ways she could not foresee. Her fall was complete, not because of vengeance, but because truth, patience, and deliberate action had been allowed to take their course. I didn't need to gloat or assert dominance. I didn't need to confront her again. Didn't need to relish in her discomfort. The outcome was already evident. She had underestimated me, miscalculated the consequences of her actions, and ultimately undermined herself. And I, having endured, learned, and rebuilt, was standing firmly in the place she once sought to occupy. She had manipulated, deceived, and betrayed, but I had turned every painful lesson into strength, every lost opportunity into insight, and every heartbreak into strategy. In the end, the story was not about her downfall alone. It was about survival, resilience, and growth. It was about reclaiming control over my own life and refusing to let betrayal define my future. She had played with my feelings, hoping to break me, but in doing so, she had only exposed her own vulnerabilities and misjudgments. The fire she ignited through deceit and manipulation had forged a version of me she never anticipated. Someone disciplined, strategic, and unshakably resilient. She was left to face the consequences of her actions, and I was free to continue building, thriving, and succeeding, undisturbed by the ghosts of the past. She played with my feelings, but in the end, she only played herself. The queen who once thought herself untouchable had fallen, and the man she had underestimated had risen, tempered by fire, sharpened by betrayal, and fully in command of his own destiny. It was a lesson in patience, strategy, and the quiet but undeniable power of truth, and it had been taught fully through the crucible of heartbreak. Betrayal is a strange and painful teacher. It strikes with a suddenness that can feel like a knife to the chest, leaving you stunned, vulnerable, and questioning everything you believe to be true. The shock is immediate, the heartbreak sharp, and the instinct to fight back, to lash out, is almost instinctual. For a moment, it feels like the world has tilted, like everything you worked for, everything you trusted, is crumbling before your eyes. But within that chaos lies a rare and powerful lesson, the opportunity to rise above, to transform pain into strength, and to reclaim control over your own life. The choice in that moment is yours. You can let betrayal shatter you, leaving you fractured and bitter, or you can allow it to forge you into someone unshakable, resilient, and strategic. The path of growth is never easy, but it is infinitely more rewarding than the path of vengeance born from blind anger. When someone betrays you, the immediate reaction is often rage. You want them to feel the hurt they caused, to experience a fraction of the chaos they unleashed in your life. But anger is fleeting, and actions taken in its heat rarely lead to meaningful outcomes. True power comes from patience, observation, and deliberate action. The energy spent on trying to hurt someone else is wasted energy. It is better spent rebuilding yourself, reclaiming your confidence, and creating opportunities that prove beyond doubt that you are stronger than the betrayal that sought to break you. Redemption, not destruction, is the path that leads to lasting satisfaction. When you channel your pain into growth, strategy, and personal evolution, you are no longer at the mercy of the person who betrayed you. You are in control, and that is the most profound form of revenge there is. Pain is a tool, but it must be wielded wisely. It can crush you under its weight, leaving you hollow and despondent. Or it can be the force that shapes you into something stronger than before. Every sleepless night, every anxious thought, every moment of self-doubt carries within it a lesson, a chance to learn, adapt, and emerge more capable. Heartbreak teaches patience, betrayal teaches vigilance, and adversity teaches resilience. Those who endure, who learn, and who apply these lessons with discipline often rise higher than those who never face the fire at all. Pain becomes fuel, heartbreak becomes instruction, and betrayal becomes a mirror that reveals both weaknesses and strengths you never knew existed. One of the hardest lessons betrayal teaches is that trust is never a given. It is earned, cultivated carefully, and maintained vigilantly. Blind faith in another person, no matter how sincere their words, can lead to devastating consequences. Love without respect, affection without integrity, or partnership without honesty is not true connection. It is manipulation disguised as intimacy. When someone betrays you, they expose not just their own flaws, but also the blind spots in your judgment. It is a painful awakening, but it is also an invaluable one. You learn to see the world more clearly, to measure actions rather than words, to prioritize consistency over charm. You become discerning, strategic, and guarded, not cynical, but wise. True revenge is not about shouting, confrontation, or attempting to inflict pain in return. It is subtle, patient, and enduring. It is the act of transforming your loss into a platform for growth, of turning the energy of betrayal into the energy of creation. It is proving, through actions and results, that the person who sought to harm you underestimated your resilience. The best form of retribution is not spectacle. It is success, composure, and mastery over your own life. It is rising to heights they claimed you could never reach, building a life so full, so independent, and so resilient that their influence on you becomes irrelevant. When someone plays with your feelings, it is tempting to attempt to break them in return, to force them to understand your pain. But that is often an empty pursuit. You cannot control others, only yourself. The energy required to hurt someone else is energy that could be used to fortify your own future. Every hour spent plotting retaliation is an hour not spent building skills, advancing your goals, and reclaiming your power. True strength comes from redirecting that energy inward, investing it in your growth, your vision, and your life. When you rise, succeed, and thrive despite betrayal, the consequences of the other person's actions are inevitable. They are exposed by the reality they cannot manipulate, and the natural order of truth delivers the justice you sought without requiring you to act vindictively. Betrayal also teaches perspective. It forces you to understand that people act according to their character, not yours. It is not a reflection of your worth that someone deceived you. It is a reflection of theirs. Recognizing this allows you to separate emotion from judgment, to take lessons without internalizing the hurt as a personal failure. You begin to understand the power of patience and foresight, that immediate reactions driven by pain often backfire, and that the strongest outcomes come from measured, thoughtful responses. This awareness is what allows you to convert adversity into advantage, heartbreak into clarity, and betrayal into empowerment. In the end, some apologies are too late, some mistakes cannot be undone, and some lessons can only be learned through personal experience. The person who betrays you may believe they have won, but the reality is that their actions often set in motion forces they cannot control. Trust broken, lies told, manipulations executed. They all leave consequences behind, consequences that unfold inevitably over time. Karma does not operate on emotion, it operates on reality. The miscalculations, the dishonesty, and the betrayal create conditions that will eventually reveal the truth and deliver justice in its own perfect timing. The ultimate lesson of betrayal is that your response defines your future. You may not be able to undo the past, but you can reclaim your life, rebuild your career, and re-establish your identity. By channeling pain into purpose, disappointment into strategy, and heartbreak into motivation, you create a life that no one can destabilize. Your strength becomes evident not through conflict, but through composure, success, and resilience. You rise above the chaos, unshaken, unbroken, and fully in control of your destiny. The person who sought to harm you may watch, powerless, as you thrive. They may realize too late that their manipulation and deceit did not weaken you. They empowered you to become everything they said you could never be. You don't need to destroy them. You only need to live, succeed, and rise above, letting the natural consequences of truth, patience, and perseverance unfold. They played with your feelings, tried to bend your life to their will, and yet in the end, the very energy they wasted on manipulation became the fuel that propelled you higher. Betrayal comes at a price, but that price is not always paid in sorrow or loss. When approached wisely, it becomes a teacher, a forge, and a catalyst. The heartbreak it inflicts is temporary. The lessons it imparts are permanent. It refines your character, sharpens your resolve, and demonstrates the unshakable power of patience and strategy. Life teaches that the best revenge is not fury. It is growth, integrity, and undeniable success. It is rising, thriving, and living in such a way that the person who betrayed you can only observe from below, recognizing the truth far too late. They underestimated you, and in doing so, they became the architect of their own undoing. Karma does not forget. It waits patiently, ensuring that actions, deceit, and betrayal meet their natural consequences. And when the time is right, it delivers justice, not through anger, but through inevitability. The fire of betrayal, heartbreak, and deception can either consume you or forge you into someone stronger, smarter, and unstoppable. The choice is yours, and the reward is life fully reclaimed, power fully restored, and the knowledge that those who once betrayed you are now powerless to influence the trajectory you have carved for yourself.